Yak echa yoch satini, tekat yohan. Ach tu yak ewuchin chasati. Tatke our anchorage kechat wutien. Molly of Denali. Adatawe wushuch autil atk. Ya kach gal at tse. Wutisatin way kleka episode. Vera a kaushikit, Vera starboard. Ya kach gal at adatawe. Ka Molly. Ka wan kanins. Ade adatiuch adul atkiye. Dat nach sasati, which agud ku gwalisatini. Ye awa wuke, ya hastu inye jechwane. Ya achtua saguch a kakachtunik, we Molly of Denali. Gwalchin kat a shkalnik, gled kach enach, a de awa hatua saguch lingit enach. Hechasaku gwatkin soe kone yakwahicha. Yachana Yéil kach ʼaan shkalnigi dat yejigach Kawan kanins dasawe we verb shukakaya aka wan kanins yedusne adverb yudosago atlet kach inach ka we noun su wan kanins a shukach wan kanins a itch gwalrita su adat yuch agachtula at we adjective yudosago at Aka away achtuasagu Esandich ak shuich anach itu hausanech ayuch atangi adach. Wasadu asago at we chapters gushuk kajin kat yeo achtuasagu itu dech yigig aya a iti asandich ak kone adati jitune. Verb kakanashi Chan kanani guksa lekatwe root classifier. Asai asako ati nechayati. Goodness cheesh. Let's see. What did I say? Just give me some parts of it, then I'll translate as we go. Just check it in, see where we're at.
Well, I know you talked about Molly F. Denali last night, and I'm sorry that I joined late, but I wanted to say thank you so much, Renee, for your advocacy, your inspiration, and the eloquent way you can speak, because I heard you this morning on the news talking about the events in Sitgakwan. And then I heard you last night speak. I did live streaming on Molly of Denali. And so it was just very inspiring to say, yeah, just we have to just keep on going, keep on learning. So thank you. And I did share those Molly of Denali's with several teachers today and encourage them to use them in their classrooms. So.
Okay, geez. Yeah, it was fun. And so that, I guess the big statement I made was everyone should have to take a language class, and there should be a language teacher in every school. So those would be big shifts. And what else? Anything else I was talking about? I forget all of a sudden.
Well, you said you wanted to go over chapters 9 and 10, and I think it's from Wusane talking about adjectives and adverbs.
Well, over the weekend, I want you folks to read chapters 9 and 10, and then next Tuesday we'll take a look at this Yéil story, and I'm going to have you find the roots and the classifiers and anything else you might spot in those verbs. So we're going to start sort of pulling them apart, seeing what goes in there, seeing how they're being used. But yeah, read chapters. So chapter 9 is introducing the Tlingit verbs. It's a lot of stuff we've already talked about, but then you'll see some of the examples that are in there. And then Chapter 10 is the classifier and root. So we're going to get to the root of it all. Adzedia. Kaskatin, tell me more about this phrase, if you can. Or where you found it.
I was looking through my auntie's song files on Google, and for the song Kosh Goss, the second verse starts off with that phrase, and in the interpretation, it translates everything else, but then it says Adzadia is hard to interpret into English. It is just an expression. And so I wanted to know how else you would use it.
Huh. Well, if you could, if there's any way you could send that to me, I could take a look at those notes and see. Not exactly sure. The second part could be to the other side. So you'd say things like diyanach, like going across a body of water. And it's sort of getting into the advanced section of some of these directional location stuff we were touching on. Is like diya and niya and what's the other one? There's one more. I'm forgetting it now. Diya, kliya. That's it. So kliya, diya, and niya, and how those things are related. I'd probably have to put something together. I don't know about that odds. Sure seem odds at the. I'll have to take a look because it could be one word. It could be two. I'll have to dig around a little bit. I don't remember hearing that, but maybe I'll recognize it from the song.
Okay, I'll send you a screenshot.
Good enough, cheese. Let's see. Oh, go
You
ahead.
mentioned writings on Nolly of Denali for Vera Starboard. Didn't she do a play recently too? I thought, like last year.
Yeah, she did one called Devilfish, which she might potentially rename Kustinaq, which is funny because one time I was in Sitka and I don't know what they did. I went into their bank because I had to cash a check, I think. And in the branch it said, I don't know if you got a prize or something, but there's trivia. And it says, what's another name for octopus? I was like, Nak, give me my thing, whatever it is. And they said, no, Devilfish. I was like, get out of town with your Devilfish. So, but yeah, she wrote Devilfish. She's written a couple other plays, I think, and then she's a screenwriter. So she writes for Molly of Denali, and she writes for a bunch of different things and teaches a bunch of writing classes. She's amazing. She's really cool. What else? Let me make sure I didn't miss anything in my opening remarks. Oh, tonight we're going to talk about adverbs and adjectives. We'll go over them kind of quickly, but I just want us to start, even though we're still in this sort of what is a verb, how do we work with a verb. This is a big part of it, is like things that can come before it to alter the verb, and then just talk a little bit more about adjectives so that you'll have a list of them, and then that'll be another list you can consult when you start running. If you run into words that you don't recognize, that looks like it might be one of those adverbs or adjectives. And then basically an adverb most always comes right before the verb. Then an adjective, there's a set of them that can come before the noun and a set that could come after the noun. But just sort of spotting those, seeing how they work, and then coming back and just doing a bit more verb work. Any other questions before we take a look at a few things? Okay. So let's look at these adjectives and adverbs. These are kind of fun. There are quite a few. Let's see. So I kind of pulled them out. Not all of them. I did cut one, which was like gives men erections easily. I was like, well, let's just leave that one in the dictionary. But we'll start with adjectives. So adjectives modify a noun. And so in Tlingit, there's two ways that we're marking these. And so one has this long dash after it, and one might have a long dash before it, And what do you think that's marking?
It attaches to the noun.
Yeah, so that's where the noun goes. So this, if you see it on this side, it goes before the noun. If you see it on this side, it comes after the noun. As far as I can tell, Tlingit will only really let you use one. No, I don't know if anybody's really field tested that, but I've never seen like two, but maybe, I don't know. Atlein dushan, maybe. It feels like it would want to switch it to a verb. A lot of these things you could do with the verb as well.
So it doesn't mean that it has to attach, because like atlein doesn't have to attach to the noun, it just means the position.
Only position, yes. So it should not attach to the noun. So this, it's written as a separate word. And there's different things that, so like, I'll do this quite a bit for like tla, jin, anything. And so this long dash means it needs to be associated with a noun. And then it shows you where that noun needs to be positioned. So we'll just kind of walk through some of these. Maybe I'll say them and we'll just say them each a couple of times. And then I'll just make any notes I might have. And then you folks will have this list. And then just keep an eye out for them. And then you'll also see that these are used to sometimes create new words. And I'll note if there might be a couple of them I might need to adjust. I'll let you know. Okay, we're going to say ake. Ake. So this is the adjective form of the verb yake. You can also say yakeye. That's totally fine. This is built into some names. There's a Lukach Adi name, Akeish, good father, and that was there's folks who have that name these days. I think Peter Marks has that name, or maybe it's I don't think it's Peter. I think it's not good. Anyways, Dennis Isaac had that name, and so it's good, right? So it comes before Akekech, Akedush, Akecha. Everybody say Atlein. Atlein. So that's much or lots of. So some people will say Atlein Gunachish, and that's saying many thanks, is how I would sort of literally interpret that. Atlein works really well to say a whole bunch of non-human things, although you'll hear people say Shia Dehain for like it was explained to me that Shia Dehain, it should have a head. So it works well for people, it could work for dogs. But I've heard it used for abstract things and for non-living nouns as well. So okay. Ask questions if you got them, or I'll just keep going. Chagu. Chagu. So this this is from chak, which is long time ago, or chak could be used to say long for a long time. Depends how it's being used. But this would be old or ancient, from long ago. One of the most common uses would be chaku kaku, the people of long ago. And that could refer to someone who lived long time ago. That could just refer to ancestors who were around long time ago. So
I always wondered on something that would say, your grandparents, but farther back. Would that work in this?
yeah, it could. Yeah, it could. Like if you're saying, like I might say, my great grandfather, he was a person of long ago. Like that's how it works. Sort of if you use chagu kawu or chagu shawat. I don't think you need the kawu, chagu ka. That works, yeah. And so yeah, it means something from long time ago. And then if you're just saying it was a long time ago, then you'd use chak.
Just so for the dash, because I guess initially when you explained it, I thought it meant that it was like attached to the noun, but does that just mean the position? Like is like when you say ʼaan, is it one word?
No, it's two.
Okay.
So yeah, and this is, we sort of did a bit of back and forth. Like we thought, well, should we put like one of those, an underscore there, and then the underscore shows it's attached. And we sort of settled on the long dash, which could be confusing because there is a hyphen, and the hyphen is just shorter than that. But then the hyphen is usually always on this side. And so we're using this long dash now to say it needs another word to belong to, and then it shows you which side it needs to be on.
Okay.
So that means ʼaan, it should always go, and then the noun that comes next, that's what you're saying. So even if it said douche, ʼaan kutzin, that means many mice, not cats.
Sheesh.
Mhm. So before we get to these next two, we're going to talk about some patterns on how verbs are sometimes converted into adjectives. One of the ways is to have, and there's little variations. You can have shun, you can have chun, and you can have chun. There probably is some slight differences between them, but someone would have to analyze that. With this one, you are getting kind of fourth person subjects embedded into these verbs with the dudle. So the du is the fourth person, gle is the classifier, and then you have a root, tau, which is to steal, and then u, which is usually to buy. So there's a different verb, hoon is usually sell. But sometimes when these things are sort of, I guess, just like, is it easily bought or easily sold? And so the buying verb is usually what Tlingit would use in that case because someone's buying it, and that's how it becomes sort of, so maybe easy to buy would be more accurate, I don't know. Okay, so we'll just say this whole one. Dutle tau chan. Dutle tau chan. So this means, and this chun or shun, it means it's usually related to like, it is like that, it has that sort of quality. Sometimes you'll see these, it's like tempting or it's easy or it causes someone to do something. And here, tleu would be the verb. So easily sold. Dutleu chan. Dutleu chan. And if I were to sort of do a bit more organizing with this and us to make list A and list B, with list B being ones that are rarely used, both of these would go on to list B. They do exist. I do not think they're common. Ak A, well, maybe I have A, B, and C. Ak A I'd put on list B. Dudle Dao Chan and Dudle U Chan I put on list C. And Aklain and Chagu on list A. So maybe I'll do a little rearranging of this before I post it online. Okay. When you get into long and short and heavy and light and all this, there's a whole bunch of things that talk about sort of dimensions and measurements and stuff. It does get pretty complex. So whether Tlingit is going to choose to say like long or short or too short is always really interesting to me. And they're usually pretty closely related. Like there's a single sound that tends to switch. Like you could say like kunase or kunashe, and those are opposite concepts. Kunashe would be it's a long ways, and kunase would be it's not a long ways. And so here's one for too short, and it's guwat. Guwat. So that is too short. I think guwat itakatat is the name that one of our elders, Kakashat, came up with for shorts. We're going to wear shorts today. They're pants that are too short. So these next two follow a pattern of putting what we call the attributive suffix onto something. So this could go on to a whole bunch, like this just shows you some common examples. This could go on to a whole bunch of different verbs. And it just says to make it that kind of noun. So kashits ihu with a U, if that changed to a W, that means to stick something on, like tape. Or something sticky, like gluing, taping, those would all be under this verb. And so, for example of how this works is you could say and that's the word for tape, like if you're going to tape something down, right? So this one, maybe I need to zoom in a little bit. Kashitsihu. Kashitsihu. So here's another one. This one I'll have to fix. That should be low tone. I thought I fixed these, but that should be, because the difference between what we call the relational suffix and the attributive is that they follow the same set of rules, but the attributive one says, I stay low all the time. The relational one says, I'm opposite of whatever's before me. So you go high, low, or low, high, but this one's just low no matter what. So this is sour, so this is used for vinegar. It's used for, it means like sour. It's used as well for like a lemon. I had an elder, he named a lemon using this one. So it really means sour, like the flavor, not like, because soured could also mean like it got rotten or something, but you're really talking about the flavor to be sour. And it's
What word did he use for yellow though?
for yellow.
Or lemon? For yellow, for the lemon.
Oh, is kashitsuhu tlek. But he was from cake, so if you're from cake, this would actually be e. It'd be kashitsihu. So he said kashitsihu tlek, a sour fruit or sour berry. That's what he called a lemon. Okay, so this one is kashitsuhu. Oops, I gotta keep it low. Kashitsuhu. Kashitsuhu. It's a bit of a challenge because you do have this ejective S, and then you got to get to a low vowel, and then it stays low, right? This one is, it's a delicate matter. It's a sensitive subject. And this one, it usually means like, the way I would hear this used a lot, like let's say we started talking about something and someone wanted to tell us that, hey, you know what you're talking about? You got to be careful how you talk about it. You don't talk about it in front of everybody. You got to really weigh your words right now. And so they'll say, this is a sensitive thing. So at works really well after these things. It's just a thing. And so this is used to talk about something that is, it just means like, so like in the notes here, you've got to talk about it carefully so you don't violate cultural laws. So another clan's atu, if folks bring you in to do some work in their community and people are saying, could you tell us who lives here and how they came here? Like that's getting into this, because even if you can tell it, then you got to be really careful. Like in Tlingit, I would start saying things like, I'm not trying to tell anybody who they are, or you just might you might need to do a little bit of introduction of yourself. Like you typically don't stand up and introduce yourself in front of people, but if I went to some community that I'm not from, and they said, René is going to tell you about this history, I might sort of say some things about myself just to say, I am connected to this clan. I do have this knowledge. I heard this thing from somewhere. So, and really getting specific. So like Kajakti told me this. Walter Sobolov told me that, and that's because it's a kashits ikwa. It's a sensitive thing. So this one is kashits ikwa. Kashits ikwa. Okay. And I'm going to skip some of these because I'm going to start skipping ones that I think are just pretty rare. And definitely check them out. I think they're interesting. If you said them, I think people who can speak Tlingit would know what you're talking about. Heat has to do with trouble. And so this could be like being in trouble, causing trouble, troublemaker, feeling worried and disturbed about something. And it's kashahiti. Kashahiti. This one is used quite a bit. It means for something to be strange. For example, the word for a thermos is kasayeyigucha because it keeps stuff warm or cold. It's just kind of strange. The name for cannabis is kasayeyiqanch. It's a strange tobacco. And so this just means it's unusual. It's really all it kind of marks. You'd want to be careful if you're using this to refer to a person. You could end up with a pretty sizable insult just by using this. But this one is kasayeyi. So this one is aged food. So this would work for if you're talking about the process of stinky eggs, as they call them. The heads, the fermented fish heads, have their own name, so they're called kink. But this could refer to letting something age to the point where, and it kind of depends. Like it could be no good, like you could be talking about something that went bad, or depends on. There's a lot of fermented foods in our area, so that might be, kahak kasich. That's what you call the fermented fish eggs, and those are good. So this one is kasich. So all these ones, just to be clear, if it says verbal adjective, that always comes before the verb, or before the noun, right? So for example, katsukhu saknein is toast, right? So this is how you can get, so these are things that are fried or toasted. Tsuk is the verb root, and that's to fry something. There are a couple other ways to talk about toasting, barbecuing, and stuff. But this one is katsukhu. I think we talked about this one a little bit on Tuesday, talking about a triangle. So that's what got me thinking about this list. And this one is bottoms up or upside down. It's kind of a fun one. I learned it because we were paddling in a canoe, and then we switched sides, and someone's raven design on their paddle was upside down. And somebody asked me how to say upside down raven, and got the answer from who told me that? Carolyn Martin, I think, was the one who told me. And so kin is the upward part, da is about, tuk is the butt, and then the in part, I'm not sure, maybe it's with. And so kinda tukin is how you'd say that one. Let's see, we'll skip that one. I do think, so this one, here's another one, these shun ones. This one is good to know because I think as people start to learn Tlingit, they learn a phrase like Atsukani, which is something you would say if something was scary right now. Like, it's sort of like saying, yikes, or something like that, right? But it can't be used to say it was scary. So I'll hear people say something like Atsukani yewuti. It's like, I see what you're trying to do there. And there is a verb to be scary. And so, or to be scared of something. So usually this verb, you're going to have something dach, and then you're going to have a kaut lachet. So you could say, wekate dach, a kaut lachet. I was scared of that dog. So whatever the dach thing is attaching to, that's what you're scared of. But you can use this form to say it was dangerous or scary. And it's shan. And we saw this one in our story. Shan. So it's scary, and then they had a verb. Thick, kusakak. So that's a verb for thick, kutla. That's a verb for for something to be stout or wide around. This is yekuwach itakatat. I think that's the name for kuwach and guwach are probably pretty much the same thing, but there is something. So you see this TL apostrophe here and this CH apostrophe here. There is a little bit of interchange between these and probably a couple others. I could put together some examples for us, but off the top of my head, the name Duktuk, that comes from Duke and Tuch, which is a variation of Tuch. So that CH apostrophe, that TL apostrophe, there is a slight difference. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Another one would be Chashakach. So Ch is hair, Sh is the classifier, Kats is sharp, but it switches from a TS apostrophe to a CH apostrophe. So there's something that goes on there. And then some of them you can see kind of, there's a bit of a meaning shift. So tutlawuch is stubborn, tutlawuch is mental fortitude, right? So those ones are pretty similar, but also slightly different. Any questions on any of those? Any thoughts?
It's probably more the difference between like tall and long, but is there a differentiation between short when it's like on a horizontal surface versus a vertical surface?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it might change to an L classifier. Let's go take a look. So we'll see. And so sometimes we go to the verb dictionary and then we end up going into Jeff Lear's stuff to sort of take a closer look. But we'll just look up short and see, what they've got in here. And then we'll maybe dig a little deeper. So here we've got guwat, right? So, and there's an interesting pattern in here. Sometimes this ga, or there's a long na that pops up in some of these distance things or direction. They're sort of measurement things, which is, there's some interesting stuff going on there. But then you have a jar, and so that is a vertical height, is what I was talking about. But then when you see that switching to the L classifier, like, so basically yet is long and kliyat is tall, or for a person to be big, basically. But here you have yayat and kliyat, and this one is changing to rope-like objects. So you got kashyande kakosani, achtasi yekshayat. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to finish it. My thread is too short. And then yekshayat duchit, we douche. That cat has a short tail. So a tail might be a rope-like object for a cat. Then we see when we put ka in front of it, the classifier stays L. Now we have stick-like objects. So kuhida yekaukshayat, the pencil is short. This yi is a prefix that you put on front of a verb to talk about length of time. And so chayeyi guwat, for a short while. And this is like coming we sort of come back to narratives a lot, like just to be able to tell stories. Like we went there for a short while. Like that's how you would do that. We were there for a little while, a short while. Now we've got insufficient length. That board is too short for that, for that spot. And then rope-like objects that are too short. It's too short. The string is too short for there. So, you know, back to categories, right? And some of this stuff, it just takes, as you sort of memorize this stuff and start to commit these patterns to your memory, it's really interesting because sometimes to go the long way, to say something's long, you might end up with something totally different than, you know, so you don't have a necessarily always the same pattern. Because if we go look up long, just to keep having fun with this stuff, now we get yayat, which is a stick-like, usually stick-like objects right off the bat. So wusani, yayat, khas, yayat. Then generally long, shiyat, dushachawu, yenachet, jinkat, kakusyuk, shiyat. It's 10 feet long. Flexible objects including rope, tus, kashiyat, it's a long thread, shakask, kashiyat, the black seaweed is long. Of a long time, so we see that yi popping up again. Yagi, yi yayat, the days are long. Kashinayat, which is not long ago, but it also like literally means it hasn't gotten to be a long time yet. Wasayik koyat, how long, in this case, are they going to stay? But it's really just saying for how long, right? So again, if you say yakyekte, kaktakuch yakate, we're gonna get in this. We're gonna go on the boat to this island, and I might say wasayik koyat, how long is it gonna be? And that's a time reference.
Interesting that even thread loses the yadi portion and comes toss.
Oh yeah, right. And so strings are usually tikyati, and then thread is, but the tus, like actually, tik is a man-made thing. Like it's made by people. Tus is actually the word for like a sinew, right? And so that name has transferred over to thread now because there's not a whole lot of people. But so I think for sinew, like I think you might call it tussie these days. Let's see if I can find it. Oops. Yeah, it's a Dauktussi, I think. No, that's not. Where'd it go? Yeah, tussie, that's it. So tussie would be, but you could still call it tuss, like if it's connected. But it's one of those words like you'd really have it disconnected first. And let's see. Oh yeah, it does go through a name change. Let me show you folks what I'm looking at here. So in terms of like body parts that get used for things, this is another whole interesting thing. So like someone wrote like about how much they love to touch the skin of a baby, which is so nice. But they accidentally put like tokane dugu, and that means you have the baby's been skinned, right? And now you have this baby skin. Now it's just gotten really creepy. Whereas like duke, that is skin that's on the body. So there is something that happens with body parts when they get removed, they gain that suffix, right? So if you ever hear a name or something that has shayi, then that's usually a removed head, right? Which is, and it could be sort of like, yeah, we get this wolf head and it's part of our atu. And we got it from this wolf at some point. That's kuch shayi. And so it would just be sha otherwise. And same with like this. So you've got tuss, but usually it's going to be tussy when it's removed from the body. And then this is one that's really interesting because it changes to duh when it's been turned into thread, like sort of gotten ready for sewing. I don't know the whole process that it goes through, but so some of them have stuff like that, you know, where it goes through a series of changes. But just remember, it's duke when it's on the thing, and it's dugu when it's removed. And we say dugu a lot because we talk about hides and skins and stuff like that. Okay. Let's check out page 2. So here we've got long, kuwat, and then, so I'm going to skip the egg-shaped one. But this one's pretty important. So this is saying an adolescent thing. So I think this would work well to say like they usually call it a yearling in English. So it's like a bear that's probably away from its mother, but its mother might still be there. So, you know, once you said katsku, we should all be like, okay, well, let's make sure we know where the mother is, just so that we don't inadvertently end up between, because they start to wander. And if the bear wanders way over here, and you don't realize that you're standing in between the mother and the bear, like that there could be trouble, right? So those are some things like where the terminology is important.
This one took me a while to find too when I read Atsukani, and I was trying to figure out what it meant. It took a while. Found it in one spot in the back of the older dictionary.
Yeah, right. And so, and it's built into Shatkiatsuku and Yetakwatsuku, and it really means adolescent. And the way it could be used as well, which is more of a metaphorical way, is if we had 3 canoes, and there was like a little canoe and a medium canoe and a big canoe, or the bowls of porridge, or whatever the things are. And then you could call the small one Yak Yadi, you call the medium one Yak Katsuku, and then the big one Yak. So that works for sizes as well. So you could have Nadak Yadi, you could, and it just means a little one. And then Katsuku is saying like a medium size, but it's not full grown, but it has to do with adolescence. And so, yeah, it took a bit of work sort of looking at these and talking with George and Marge and just sort of like doing some stage of life stuff. Most people wouldn't say like tsik Katsuku, they'd just say Yedi. But I do think there was a time when we used to differentiate where Yedi was like with mama all the time, getting food from mama. And then Katsuku would be sort of starting to go out on its own. Okay. Let's see. Ka is male. So just keep in mind, so that's a low tone before the noun. Ka kuakan. Ka kakaktushi. We'll go look for a male deer, you know. Or, you know, we see a couple of, you know, if depending on the season, right? Dakasakakwaun. Shinach akadzisk. Wait, which one am I going to shoot? One on the right is a male. That's the one. So, you know, I was going over these one time just with some learners, and somebody told me, said, we'd never use those. I was like, sure you would. Like a male dog, a female dog, that just, it's not a very common thing, but it would be used. This was pretty fun. I think for some speakers from Atlin, it might change to kudziti, which is really interesting. Like I do think the verb root in there is t, but kustin, this means monstrous. So kustinak is that gigantic octopus. And it's not like I saw this octopus and it was really big. It would be like that squid that must live in the ocean, and every now and then its eyeball will roll up, and its eyeball is like this big, so it's gonna swallow the whole boat. You know, this is the one. So and there were kustin kutzin. There was a giant rat that lived in a cave, got killed. There's kustin nak. It lived out by cake, and it got killed. There was kustin sisk. There was a giant owl, and that got, you know, we kill all the giant things. All these stories end with it getting killed, but those things did exist, and that's how you talk about them. So this is, like, you could say it was a really big, like if you saw some really big thing, bigger than usual, like if you saw an ermine that was very big, but you wouldn't use Kustin unless that ermine was like 6 feet long, like, you know, really monstrously sized things, right? Okay. Oh, I didn't. This is an old version. I didn't cut it out. That's why. There's that one. Qat. Well, we use this, like, for example, as we're starting to differentiate between butter knives and other things, or technically the word for bowl was the same as the word for plate, so sikh. So what we've been doing is we differentiate, like, especially like running a daycare and thing.
Contemporary starts in 10 minutes.
Okay. So we started calling a bowl sikh, in a plate sikh hot, or sikh hot. So that's how we were differentiating. And I think chitakat is a name for butter knife. So it's a thin and flat knife. Let's see. What are some
I had a
Oh,
question about kut.
ah,
Is that just a contraction of kudach? And is it used like, I guess I've seen that in kudkayanaha.
yeah.
I guess the question is, does it contract when it's being used with certain words, or is it just completely interchangeable with kudach?
Well, what it is they are the exact same word. Some of them, it's kind of like, you wouldn't say kudach ayanaha, because some of them get frozen into the noun. It's like built in there now. But you could say kudch, and it's probably just speaker preference. I would say I hear kudach more than kudch. But it totally works. And this dach can, like, what happens is the vowel can fall out of there. And we know that the vowel is falling out because the vowel changes the T to a D. So if you remove it, you end up with tch, which you can have, if a noun ends with a vowel, you could just put the TX on there. You know, and so you might have that. So you could say shoot from the, or you say yat from the face, shoot from the nose. So you could do that. I would say it's probably less common to hear that these days, but it comes with the dach contracting to that TX, which you see right here. So it means coming from kh. Good question. Okay, let's see. Other ones that are important, that are just common, I guess. Shingit, so like shingit kusti. If you had, you know, if we had to differentiate between things for some reason, like say it's a shingit kuku, it's a shingit basket. Shingit kaki, it's a grouse, it's not a chicken. Right? Shitsaki, that one's pretty fun because it does mean bony, but it also means hardworking and old school shingit thinking, I guess. Shishuku is funny. So I think we're using, no, we weren't using, we're saying achuk yuchatunk for joke. That was the term that's how we're creating the noun, joke. So if you're going to stand up, you might say achuk yuchatunk aya. This is a joke, right? Just so in case you don't want to get in trouble, right? Let's see.
Hune.
Ah,
So for the shugu, I've heard this phrase is like chaga kahu out, chaga kahu out, kiss at hua shugu. Is that don't make me laugh? Or chaga kahu out, kiss at hua shugu?
it sounds like I just tried, but I didn't.
But I didn't laugh. Or is that the same verb root in there? I was just wondering. Hua shugu.
Yeah, I would probably say just kana'aq. But then you get to make someone laugh, which I think is a little different.
Is that like like I'm trying not to laugh?
Yeah, I
Maybe?
think so.
Okay. I just wanted to know if it was the same verb root because it went short in it because it was the negative or
I would expect chakachwa'aq. Kechachshuku. So I tried not to laugh.
okay. Goodness cheese.
So so I think you'd have kleshuk for make me laugh, which I'd have to look up. So these, let's see if it's in here. Like if you're commanding someone. Oh, hold on. So we'll go down to shok. But I don't think see, so okay. Here's what you do. So if I was trying to figure out how to say make me laugh, and if I have a speaker, I can say, how do you say make me laugh, right? And so, or how do you say make them laugh? And this is how you sort of start testing some verbs. And sometimes you have to test a verb out with the speaker because it might not be fully documented. So if I look up this verb and it says to make laugh, to cheer up, to joke with, and we see do yuqatangi kletsu ach I ulshuku. Their speeches don't make me laugh. So this does give you a few sort of things to understand. One is it's probably, doesn't seem to be an object on there, so you would expect N-E. So I might expect ach ich aucheshuk. But then I don't know how that stem is going to be because I don't know the conjugation type of the verb. If this gave me the perfective, I might be able to get it. Then we see hastu ich at nuch. This gives me a repetitive form with an underlined X, and I might be able to find it by going to look up the repetitive imperfective of the verb. So then I would go over to Carrie's database, and I'd say, well, maybe she has it. But then I see laugh at it, smile, laugh and smile. I have heard that if you want to differentiate between laughing and smiling, there is a slight difference. And the difference is you would put ya right there. So if you put ya in it, which is face, now you've got smiling. Otherwise, it's laughing or smiling. But I've heard if you want to do specifically smiling, you put ya in there. So now we don't have enough information to fully use this verb. So then the last place we're going to look, and then especially as you folks start thinking about what you're going to do over the summer, some of you might have access to speakers, some of you might not. And so sometimes we might need to say, okay, we need to send this question over to Teslin to test with the speakers. And so my third source is going to be Jeff Lear's notes. And so these are the verb notes. I'm going to go down to the SH, open up SHU, and then I see shuk, to laugh. I got to zoom way in. And so we do have a lot of information here. We have Atsuk kept laughing. And then he does make notes around here. And it is hard to see, sorry. So we see N-INV, that should be telling us it's na conjugation, and it's an invariable stem. Laughed, smiled, is making them laugh or smile. And so here's the verb we're looking for. At shashuk. So we don't really have enough information. Like I would guess, my guess for saying make me laugh would be at shashuk. Because I think it's going to be a 0, but I don't know. That's my best guess. And I'll send this to Yéil and see if he can ask Anya Shahash. So a couple of things about it, though. So this shows us an imperfective, which means we can't guess any information out of it. We need it to be a perfective that could tell us if it's 0 or not. We might get a future. I mean, ideally, we'd have a command. If we have a command, then we could build that verb all the way out in all the different ways. We also don't know if this always stays long and low. I'm guessing it might not. I would guess it's sort of like laughing, but then you change the classifier and everything else kind of stays the same. The other thing is you have ut as an object, and so that's how you would get laughing. But if you forgot the ut, and if you just said ach I shashuk, you might be saying make me laugh at it or at them. Okay, that was a lot of information, sorry. But like just sort of giving you a preview of, there's a lot of incomplete sort of things that we don't fully understand how this verb works. There's probably 4 or 5 kind of very highly fluent elders left. So we've got to also sort of do some of this field work to say, okay, what are the things we don't know how to say? Because once those speakers are gone, we might not be able to figure that stuff out. We might have to just sort of guess and reconstruct unless we can get some of the other speakers to tell us. Because we do have probably 20 to 30 birth speakers left who could speak at a high level, but I would say there's maybe 6 or 7 right now that could speak at that highest level. So it's pressure's on. It's a good question. Atleshuku means says funny things. Sheshuku means it is a funny thing. Let's see, we'll probably retire this move on pretty soon. You know, the list is here to look at them, and I will go through and organize them into, I'll just say the common ones and maybe not so common ones. That way you could focus on the, you know, sort of getting those ones. Klenk is used quite a bit. Yak klenk. Big boats. Getting a buzzing noise from somewhere. Okay. The other one, which maybe we'll save for Tuesday, is looking at, so those ones we looked at just modify nouns. But we'll look at a few others that modify verbs. And those ones, they'll come right before the verb. They're pretty interesting in terms of how they work. But maybe we'll take a break now and come back and get back into our story. It's a little bit more interactive. Any questions before we shut down this list for now? Okay, geesh. Come back at 20 till, so 6:40 Alaska time. Okay, so just keep an eye out for some of these things, the adjectives, the adverbs. You'll see they're not super common. I would say adverbs are probably more common than adjectives. I think it does tend to describe things. It's interesting if we get into description, like it tends to move into verbs pretty quickly, I think. But there are quite a few that are used, like yi and sak, and just understand the relationship between those two. So they both come right after a noun, and sak means it's going to be that thing. So there are stories called icht sak, which talk about how someone became an icht. Sometimes the whole string of raven narratives is called Yéil sak. It would become raven. I've heard it for like ha'atchai sak. It's going to become our food. And then also like chuch sak or shat sak for someone that you're going to marry. I've heard that as well. And then yi means it used to be that thing. So I've heard that for kinship, like ach ish yi, which it doesn't mean that they're not their father anymore. It means they're not alive anymore. So sometimes it is used that way. And then also, like if a relationship ends, you could have ach yidaku yi or ach shatk yi. So for an ex-partner or an ex-spouse, you can use those ones as well. Yeah. All right, let's get back to our Shkashnik. So here's where we left off. When we get done with this, we'll probably move into some more. We'll bring back up some conversational stuff as well, just so we can focus on communicating with each other as well as learning the ins and outs of the language. So we left off with this little owl having a long beak and then raven tying pitchwood to it. That gets us here. First sentence is line number 1. Can somebody read that for us?
Ya ganch, ya teich.
Gunchish. And what do we recognize in here? Did we look up teich? I felt like we were out of time and we didn't really look it up. Maybe we'll take a look.
That was page 4, wasn't that the pitchwood?
Yes, it is pitchwood. It's a torch, but it's also pitchwood. So I guess how do I do this? Why isn't it found? Okay. Oh, whoops. Because I'm not looking in a dictionary. I'm looking in the adjective list. So kuch is pitch. And let's just talk about this for a second. So kachi, so you'd usually have as, kachi, is sap. And then sap is really runny. And then kuch is pitch. And pitch is usually kind of more sticky. As da kuchu is sometimes what it's called, or as kuchu. If you're getting it on the north side of a tree, that's where you'd harvest it typically for medicines, because it's not going to be baked by the sun or dried up, or however we want to talk about that. But on the south side, it gets sunlight on it regularly, so it tends to dry up and it tends to get really hard, and that's what we call teich. So you got kuch, kachi, and teich. Those are all similar things, but different. And so the teich is that dry pitchwood that works really well for starting fires. And it's also the word for a torch. So in this context, we are certainly talking about, oops, I don't know if I was sharing my screen or not. But we are talking about pitchwood. So that gets us to cha. Do we know what cha is in this context?
Does it add emphasis?
It does. And so I usually translate it as you see. And then sort of like, it kind of depends. on how it's being used, but I think that's a pretty good translation of it. And so that leaves us with yagunch. What do you folks think?
Already burning?
Yeah, so I would, so you have, so there's gun right there, and then you have ch. And so in this case, I would say it burns. And so there are a couple of verbs, like one example where you see something like this is you'll see a set of verbs with the verb root ach, right? And so like cho'ach, I hear it. Isach cho'ach, I heard your voice. But then you said, if you say cho'ach, that means I am able to hear it. I can hear it. So sometimes what this ch suffix does in a couple of situations, it says, like I would say yagunch is flammable, right? So it's burnable, it's flammable. So in this case, I would say, there's a couple ways you could do it. I would probably say puchbud is really flammable. So then I would sort of adjust that, because you could say you see, but sometimes it's really just putting emphasis on what you're saying. And it kind of depends. Like as you do translation work, you just sort of think about, well, what does this say? And then and then sometimes you adjust it once you sort of, like we've been talking about, sometimes it's a multi-phased approach. Like you start putting all the words together, then you rearrange them into how would you say a similar thing in English. Okay, what about this one?
Aga awetsa Yéil shukawaja ʼaan tu ʼaan idakin.
Good. Sheesh. And what do we recognize and what do we not? So let's do this top part first. I guess, do we know what sa is?
Yeah, so aga, then after following.
Yeah, aqa away is usually and then.
Is it like kind of, or I can't remember.
Let's go check it out and go look for sa. So here we have only then. So it often appears between two verb phrases where the first verb happens just after the second, where the second verb required the completion of the first. Shtakat yach ayatlaslichawetsa takte kunaye uwakut. Only when he had broken all of them, then he started walking up. So this is from a story. There was a hunter named Kakachguk, and he kept missing these seals with his spears. Something weird was happening, but when he went home, he broke them all. And it says, so in this case, in terms of like kind of sequencing things, like saying, when he did this thing, then he did this other, then he started to do this other thing. So it usually is talking about a sequence, but a sequence that requires action. Like only after they had cleaned up the camp did they start to cut the fish or whatever, right? So it's like one thing had to happen in order for the other. So in that case, when we have aqa away, you can a really good translation for that is and then, right? And it's also a really good phrase to use to say, just jump ahead in the story a little bit. But when you say aqa away tsa, I would say, and only then or only after that. But usually I would say only then. And that takes care of the tsa. And what about Yéil Atsukani? Should we go look it up?
Yeah, because juk is the one that's the killing verb, right?
Yes. Jak is
Okay.
killing. Well, jak is killing. Jak is beating up. They're so close. Those ones are so close. You really got to get that W on there. But here, so all these things are here. There's the sh and the ka, the zero classifier, which they write as ya, and ja. To instruct, to show by word, to advise, or give advice to. So we'll go look up instruct, and then we'll go look up advise, and just see some examples of this. So instruct, so we've got teach how to do something. And this is like to give someone mastery, I guess I would say. Jikawaka would be like to give someone orders to do work. Ayaka would be to give someone orders to say something. And then you have private instruction, which is kind of interesting. And then we have shikawaja. They are giving you instructions. Yi shukdujades. Gunchij khat shukayi jayi. Thank you for showing me. We can also go look this up in the database just to see some examples of how it might be used and also to spot the theme. So here we have object shu ka, subject 0 ja, and which is to instruct, show, advise, give advice to, counsel. And then we have all these different ways we could see. It does end with a double A. That means when we put a suffix on it, it changes to EI. So there you get ashakujays. Yeah, so we'll go back. Aka ye ashakawaja. Only then. What?
He directed.
Right, directed, instructed, advised. Right, and it's a really interesting, because, you know, Raven gets some interest. There's some interesting verb choices always when you're dealing with Raven. And what about yuchan tuch an yitakin?
Is the yidakin the flying one?
Yes, I would expect it to be idakin, but I think the speaker was saying yidakin.
So it's like pluralized. The dot, is it already happened? And then the flying?
Well, in this case, so I'll just leave it because I don't know what they're doing. It's a command. So in this case, it's saying, fly.
Fly into that fireland over there.
Yeah, and then this one, if you see it in a spot where it doesn't look like it would make sense to be land or a village, there's this thing where you have and ʼaan can combine and become on. So ʼaan is with it. So you'll see if on pops up right before a verb, that's usually do that verb with it. So like I might hand you a pencil and say on shachich, club them with a pencil, right? So in this, that's what you have going on here. So then we go to the translation, and he's instructing fly through that fire over there with it. Or however we want to do the word order. Fly with it through that fire over there. Okay. Let me check on 2 quick. See if I have that. Okay, this, let's see. There is this phrase that I want to point out before we do this next one. Atuk. This is another narrative device, which I think these stories are great to look at because they show you some of these things. And so this one is furthermore. So just in the context of like story, so like there's more, right? So it's just going to give you a little bit more information. Okay. Can I get a reader for this one? Atu.
Atu idekat atu higatian hiasingit ania aslehie ayu yes.
Good geesh. So, there's a lot packed into this sentence. I'll just say that. So maybe let's go kind of chunks at a time. What is k'takat at?
Everything.
Okay, furthermore, everything. And we've got eqa. Okay, so it's not eqa. If that was not underlined, you would have true. Is underlined, it's kind of different. Atuk k'takat at eqa tiyan. And let's talk about this one. So, eqa, we're going to go see if we find that one in the dictionary. So there I was looking for 2. So we go down to this X underline, and we're looking for eqa. Down. So here it is. Pleasing, pleasant to, taste good, satisfying the request or words, mouth opening, and so I do think it is number 2, satisfying the request or words. So that means we come back, and I'm going to help you folks with this one, because this took 3 of us to figure out what they're saying here. Atuk shtakat at duqeqatiyan. What this is saying is everything used to do what he said. It's a pretty complicated concept, but the way it works is you have T to be, yin saying it's decessive. It used to be like that, but not anymore. Duqeqa. There are different ways to sort of interpret this if it was duqeqa yati. And so But what it comes back to is like he says it and their reaction ends up becoming pleasant to him. So there's kind of a lot of kind of almost circular stuff going on in here. And so like luckily I had these two elders, Marge and George, I could say, okay, I know what those words are, but you know, some of them when you put them together, so I would say, furthermore, everything used to obey him. There's another way that sometimes this is used where you'll say chayach. So you could say achayach ye'ausane. They did it like I told them to. So you have chayach, right? Or someone might say, wanachsaya yatayach atayechine. Why are you working on it like that? I'm working the way they told me. So sometimes there are short ways to say things like that. Like their mouth. Pleasant to the mouth. So, and then we have Yashingetani, Ya Akshayech Ayu, Yéil. Raven is making the world. Or, you know, the one who made the world. Which is interesting because this is not a perfective verb, but I would probably say the one who is making the world. Because sometimes they'll call him Shingatani Yéil, the raven who made the world, because the world flooded, he built it back up with this sea otter. Everybody okay? Ooh, what? Okay. Oh, anybody want to read this one?
Hataya. Oh,
Oh, go back. Yeah, I can do it. Dak with the pin de ash ayach. Dushu de kachwat with tes.
Sheesh. And we've seen most of these words before. They're just sort of being presented back to us. So how about dak with the kin de? That's sort of one complete thing.
Is that flying into somewhere? Flying towards somewhere? Flying up?
Well, we have flying, and we have two directionals, which is really interesting. You can do this, right? So what we have is, what is the dak part? No underline, especially in this context.
Out to sea.
Out to sea, a singular they flew towards it. So you can do both of those things. Went out to sea, and we already know what it's towards because we've been talking about this fire, but in this case, I would say, and you know, they flew out to sea. And what about ush, ayach? I guess, do we know what the ush is? Maybe this is our first time running into that.
Doesn't it mean to the south?
That would be chush, or you could say chush chayach. That would be as I said, right? Which would be, I don't know. I guess maybe if you were planning out, I don't know, it wouldn't really work. But what the ush is, it is a pronoun, and you're going to see it pop up as an object or a possessive pronoun. And this is probably a new one for some of us, and it means this one we've been talking about. Or you could think of it as the main character. So if you start seeing ush, that's a quick way that Tlingit refers back to the main character. If you're reading a Raven story and it says ush, that's usually Raven, almost always. But that means this person we've been talking about. But in this case, and then you have chayach, which means like they said.
I found according to our instructions. Yeah.
Mhm. And then the last part, dullude kachat weiteil. Remember that part? We had kachat already, I think.
To his nose.
Mm-hmm.
Is the yesh or the tesh the pitch? So to his nose, the pitch.
It's good.
Pitch would.
Mm-hmm. And kachat, do we remember that one?
Is that put on or?
Yes, it's attached to. So Raven had already attached it. So then we have to his nose. It's attached the pitch wood, right? And then we can rearrange that if we want to. I think we're just going to leave it for now. I'll probably say the pitch wood is attached to its nose. Or it's, we also have like these weird things to come over, like we don't know if that's a male or female, but we have to kind of decide. We could just say they as well, moving it back. And Raven, I think, is a male, but when we get into Cook and all these others, I don't think it could be either way. Okay, another page down. Finish this one. We're halfway through our story. Can somebody read this?
Gwelltlachia dachdewe achsachat achsa achsachat. Is that getting the pronunciation? Gwelltlach dachdewe achsachat. Oh, continue.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm in suspense.
Tlachia duwak chande.
Sheesh. I am going to adjust. I would expect this to be dakte. I probably did that wrong. And then this is something that you'll see is this letter A can get dropped right out of there, right? And so you'd see that with akshahit, writing it, and so it is unusual when you first start seeing it though, because you're like, wait, a K to an S, right? But it's just that letter A getting knocked out. Because you have, once you get into three things, so the classifier is the prefix, and then everything attached to that, and if you have three, that means we're going to start to get some contraction. It doesn't always happen, but it means if there's anything that can, it's going to start doing it. And the can't go anywhere because we need to know it's there. The si can't contract because we need to know that it's plus I. So. But what do we have? What are these parts? There's quite a few. This one's really interesting. It's a really interesting sentence because there's one verb in the whole sentence. There's a whole bunch of other words there.
Kune, do you mind reading it for me, please? Or just the flow. Cheese.
Yeah, there is a flow and like with the vowels, so yeah.
Quash is maybe but doubtful.
Yeah. Let's just say maybe. What's tlach?
Is that very?
Very, right? So there's an adverb, right? Ooh, we just learned about adverb. There's one. Now let's talk about we had doc before this, and sort of like the meaning depends on the context, because doc and dock have like 6 different things they can mean, and they're opposite of each other, right? So dock is out to sea, dock is away from the sea up to the inland. Dock is also coming out into the open from the shadows or of the woods. Dock is going into the shadows or into the woods. Probably Doc is coming into this world. Doc is going out of this world. Doc is going onto fire. Doc is going off of fire. There's another set of meanings as well. If I were to extend my arm, that is going doc. And if you were to say close to my body on my arm, that would be doc. And that is what we have here, which is kind of tough to sort of, because you're like, wait, wasn't he going, didn't they go doc with deqin? Didn't they go doc with deqin? So what this sentence is talking about, and we could tell from the verb, is where did Raven put this thing? Gwash tachya takde awe aksechat, which gets really tricky to translate. So I would say maybe he attached it, maybe he attaches it very close to its body. Oops. Now this is referring to what we just said. What do you think?
Very
Very
close
near.
to his eyes.
Okay. Okay. Can I get someone to read this one?
Ataya.
Ah,
Galtut aya adatin ya nak luhur ya aku khat kut
Gulchish. Galtutaya at the teen. Ya naklu. Ya kuk hunt good. Okay. And what do we recognize? There's a verb in there. I'll just give you the verb. Unless
Is
anybody.
the teen the saw?
It does
Or is it
look.
a different one? Yeah.
It's a different one. It's actually T, but it gets an N on it for reasons I don't fully. I don't know, but it means for something to be sitting there or lying there, and it's a compact object. So this is there's a set of these verbs that have to do with like handing something around, like we'll take a look at these as well. It's going to be, I think it's in these 2 chapters we're going to read in Hausa Necha Yukatangi. So we do have like Achjit Te, hand me the compact object. Achjit Satan, hand me the stick-like object, right? And every one of those has a similar one, which means to be sitting somewhere. For example, you could say Achjit Satan, hand me that stick. There's a mountain this way called Tlach Satanjin. Tlach, very. Satan, a stick-like object sitting there. Jin, hand. Once you get the pieces, the bigger words start to get easier to remember because you start to see them. So, adatin means it is sitting there. and then the T attaches to where it is sitting. So, and this is not like for someone to sit. It's for some object to be laying there, like a rock. Like you say, a rock is on the floor. A cut adatin weta. So what is it? Where is it sitting? It's in qaltut, which is, everybody know that one?
Is that like in pocket or no?
Yes. It's sitting in his pocket. And pocket is an interesting one because it doesn't need to have inside. You don't have to say qaltut toot because tu is built onto there. There are a couple of these compounds that work like this. Qaltut actually means inside the hip. So that's another one. So just remembering that one, right? Like you have qat, which is your hip, and then it contracts to qat, and then tu is inside. Qaltutay adatin. What is in his pocket?
Is that the beak?
It's a beak.
Whoa.
A beak of what?
Octopus.
Devilfish.
And ya kak khant good. There is this other thing that we see with motion verbs where sometimes you just have good or kuch. And I'm not exactly sure how this one works either, but it means when they did that thing. So when he went, what?
Is that little owl?
Yes, when he went to that little owl. Now, I will say speakers regularly have translated kuk as a little hawk. I am sure it's an octopus. What am I saying? It's an owl. I'm not sure of anything. But I did have extended conversations with a whole room full of elders. Gold Belt Heritage Foundation used to have these big gatherings of elders, and it was probably 10 years ago, and there'd be like 15 speakers in a room. It was just amazing. And I used to sit by ones I really, really love because some of them were pretty quiet. But then they lean over and they say, that's not right. It's this thing, you know? And so just really there was a bunch of stuff we were trying to sort of tease out. We're like, okay, we keep hearing this. Some people are saying it's this, some people are saying this, that, and then would have big discussions about it. It was really fun. And so that's how the kuk clarification came about. But I'm not going to say anybody is wrong about it too, because they might have called it hawk owl and some of that stuff as well. You might have a highly fluent elder, but they don't know what these things are called in English, especially all these little birds and everything. Start getting into mergansers, and then there's local names for all these things, and so.
I think I'm a little bit lost with all these pronouns with all the it's. I don't know if I need to go back a page or maybe
Good idea. So let's look at the translation and I will also clarify. Okay, so the world had flooded because Raven defeated his uncle, who was the moon. So after he defeats his uncle, he goes up and just becomes the moon and floods the world. So then Raven flies up and pokes his beak through the sky and just swings around there. Eventually starts wishing for a kelp island, which appears beneath him, and he falls on it, and he wants to take a break. But a sea otter pops up, and then he gets this idea. He's like, hey, can you reach the bottom? Is there sand? He says, yeah. He's like, why don't you go get me some sand? So the sea otter keeps bringing all the sand up, and Raven rebuilds the world with it. Then he has some sand left over after he's rebuilt the world as it is. So he throws it, and it becomes the Aleutian Islands. So then he flies out there. He's like, maybe I can rest here. So then he goes to take a rest and catch his breath. Then he looks out to sea and he sees what is probably a volcano. And there's no fire at this time. And you couldn't light things on fire at this time because the world was just flooded. And so he's there, everything with these birds were around. And so he starts walking around trying to convince these birds to go out there. And they keep saying, no way. And there's a bit of a sequence thing here that's really interesting. So he finally convinces this one bird, the owl, that little owl, to do it. And this bird had a really long beak. And so he convinces him, and some things that might be missing from this version, and they might pop up later, was the owl was, everybody's worried that their beak is going to burn off. And the owl says, well, my beak is going to burn off. But Raven has an octopus beak in his pocket and says, I got a better beak if your beak does burn off. And, well, I don't think we've gotten to this other part yet. So that's where we sort of, that's kind of where we're at now. And then Raven ties this pitchwood on. And then I think he's trying to figure out, I think he has a plan. Because if he ties it up close to his face, maybe if he ties it like way out at the end, it's going to burn and probably just fall off into the sea. But if he ties it up here, it might burn off, but he might be able to come back in time before it falls off his face. That's what I think, as far as like filling in all the blanks after working with this story and reading a whole bunch of different versions of it. And that's where we are now. But yeah, it is non-linear in a lot of ways. Like, and you'll hear storytellers do, and it could be like, I do this all the time when I'm telling stories in Tlingit. I was like, oh, I forgot to say that there was this thing that, there's this seed that's going to come to fruition, and sometimes you forget to drop it at certain spots. So all of a sudden but then also I think the Tlingit timeline too, like you'll notice like they just start, it jumps around a little bit. But yeah, Gunchish for asking. Ha is surprise. So this is just another one, like in the interest of time. When you see ha, it's usually just, oh my. And it kind of depends. There's a few different ways you can translate that. Okay. What about this one? Anybody want to read it?
Hada, adedah, idaki.
Right. Sheesh. Hada is like hadla or hado. There's different ways we can interpret that as well.
Yeah, it seemed like Hagla too was like, what? Wow, at the same time.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I think not even. I think I've heard that. I like that. And so kind of and these are things like once you translate a whole piece, sometimes you'll come back and say, okay, what do I want to say here to do something similar in English? And so maybe we'll do the second part, then we'll come back and decide on the first part. So coming back, this is a command to fly. But then there's two directionals again, which we're seeing, and it's fine. But how are we going to translate that second part?
Come back from there.
Fly. Well, you'd have to have kuch in there. So also in this part, even though we've gotten all this stuff, no one's flown anywhere yet. And it's easy to get lost. It's so easy to get lost in these things. Like literally took 3 of us, including 2 90-year-old master speakers, to just work on these. And this is also a mishmash of 3 different versions. So if you're feeling like, man, why do I get so lost? It's because this is the really hard stuff. But we'll do some easy stuff after we're done with this story. Atedaki dakin. What is the dak part?
Out to sea.
And what is the ade?
Towards there.
So now how are we gonna do? What are we gonna do for hada? Is it G?
Would that be like oh my or hada, or would that be like hagalo kind of thing?
Yeah, it would be like hado.
Holy.
So like in this context, you know, I think he's maybe getting a little frustrated. So it's like, come on, go out there already, right? Okay. Oh my, I like that. 4 minutes. We're more than halfway through this story. This one should be, the first one should be so fast. So we read it and translate it.
Atsukani.
Uni. We can do it together, my friend.
Yes, my friend. Goodness, geez.
If Raven ever says this, you're probably getting scammed, and you're also probably gonna do it. That's just how it goes. What about the next line?
Achuni chat idashe. My friend will give you fish. Or
That's a really good prediction on the chat. But remember we had on just a little while ago, and that was ʼaan. You can also do these things. I'm going to write it over here. So you can have ʼaan, and that can become ʼaan. And you can have eat, and that can become chat. So if I said eat idashe, what is that?
Please help me.
Yes. Good sheesh. Oh, we're on a rhythm now. We're going to get to this hard sentence. And then we're going to walk through that. Because then we're going to see how Raven talks when you really want something. It's fun. Can someone read this one? This isn't the hard one. You got to go. And we'll get to the hard one. Then we'll be done for the weekend.
Khataya. You on the dock idakin.
Okay. And what do we have here? We should recognize the docket, the clean.
Fly out to sea.
Yes, then he substituted odd day. He just put the thing right in there. On day. Fly out to sea towards that fire. And now this is a classic Raven move. So this is a verb we call the potential. And the key is sort of like right here. There's a complicated structure here, which has to do with, I think we saw this verb earlier. We're going to back up a little bit. I'm looking for it. Yasayek, to bring something, to drag it over somewhere. So in this one, when you have yaqisiyeki, there's a couple of complicated things in here. Well, a bunch. There's a whole bunch just packed into this one verb. So this is what we call a potential. A potential is a complicated verb form. We can learn all the things that go into it. This one is second person, which is not very common, but it means might do it. So if you put gwash, if you said gwash yaqisayek, you might do it. I could say gwash yaqisayek, you might not do it. And I say gwash yaqisayeken, you might have done it, but it's all using the same form. So even though it's complicated, once you've got it, you could just put things on the other side. And if I put ade and ye. I'd say especially if I have klesh in front of it. So klesh ade yaqisse ye. You cannot drag it. So this is how you do the cannot. So might not, might have, cannot. They all use this same complicated verb form. And because it's Raven, he puts ge in there as well. And he does some of these that are very long strings of things. So I think Raven just starts talking in a really complicated way. And then people are like, fine, I don't even know. It's like, it's really interesting. And he does this all the time. When you put this all together, is there no way you can bring me that fire? That's what he's saying. Is there no way you could do it? And he does this. If you read through that Raven book, you'll see him doing stuff like this all the time. And sometimes you're getting these double, triple negatives in there too. Is there no way you couldn't have heard something that came out of that whale? And it's really, you get some really fun, like logical puzzles and also just grammar stuff puzzles in there, which is why it's really fun and why I think the master storytellers would tell the Raven stories, because you have to talk like Raven in them. So that concludes this week. Read those chapters. So read those chapters again, going back to how Sanecha Yukatungi, and just sort of getting a description of this stuff. I know we've been moving through this stuff already, but chapter 9, introducing the Tlingit verb, and chapter 10, the classifier and the root. And then we'll keep going through this story, but then we'll also grab a whole bunch of sentences that are a lot more straightforward than these. Not trying to talk like Raven when we're still trying to just talk. But then we'll look at how this stuff works so that we can go back into this and keep spotting it. Because there's going to come a time when you're going to read this story and just enjoy it and have so much fun. And also think about the time when it just drove you crazy because like you couldn't figure out all these little things. Yeah. What? Anything else before we go?
For my Elizabeth Karatovich sentences, would I be able just to email them to you just to see if it like flows correctly and all that?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Goodness cheese. And yeah, the Raven stories are so fun. I will put a link up on our class page of the complete texts. They're all still in a draft form, so you'll probably see all kinds of mistakes and stuff. But if you're curious about how big these things get, like check them out. Like that's the top. That's why it's taken 40 years to get this book done. And counting, but maybe we're close. Okay. Gonna cheese you on. Bukecha.
Sheesh.
Benefchi.
Sheesh.
Enough trees.
Tiyakin.
Yagen.